Thank you for joining us today here at ADRA. We're so grateful that we can take this opportunity to share with you a few helpful mental health tips that can help us to weather the crisis that is before us, especially during this COVID-19 world that we're living in. We're so glad you joined us today. We want to talk to you a little bit about worry. What is worry all about? You've probably heard about someone being called a worry wart. Worry is something that we consciously and even subconsciously think about of something that may not be a reality. I want to share with you a very interesting and intriguing story that moved me, and perhaps you can find a lesson from this amazing story. Perhaps you've shopped there before. It was one of the largest departmental chain stores named J.C. Penney, named after Mr. J.C. Penney. He was a genius behind one of the world's largest chain department stores. He had built his business to a multi-million-dollar level when he lost $40 million in the stock market crash of the 1920s. Those years were known as the Dust Bowl years, the Depression years. 3 years later, when he was 56 years old, he had to sell out to satisfy his creditors, leaving him virtually broke. He worried so much that he couldn't sleep. The stress from his chronic fatigue actually depressed his immune system, and he suffered a relapse of the chickenpox virus that had been dormant in his nerves since he had the rash as a child. The recurrence of this virus, called shingles, causes severe pain. He was hospitalized at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. He tossed and turned all night and he couldn't sleep, broken physically and even mentally. He was overwhelmed with the fear of death and wrote farewell letters to his wife and his son, since he didn't expect to live until the next morning. I'm not sure if anyone feels that way or perhaps knows anyone who feels that way, but this was his reality at the time. And it was interesting to note that even the very fear and the worriment that he was going through, this unnatural worries, caused him to go into depression and actually compromised his immune system. Well, I want to share with you a lesson on that when we come to the close of this story. So, Mr. Penney that night, as he tossed and turned, couldn't sleep, but he finally was able to capture just a few hours of sleep, then to be awakened early in the morning by staff singing in the hospital chapel. He heard an old hymn, "Be not dismayed, whate'er betide, God will take care of you." He quickly followed the musical notes, and it led him down the hallway into the chapel, where he slipped into the back row. He felt something happen to him at that moment he couldn't explain. He writes, and I quote, "I felt as if I had been instantly lifted out of darkness, of a dungeon into a warm, brilliant sunlight. I felt the power of God as I had never felt it before. I realized that I alone was responsible for all my troubles. I knew that God, with His love, was there to help me. From that day to this, my life has been free from worry. I am 71 years old, and the most dramatic and glorious minutes of my life were those I spent in the chapel that morning." End of quote. As a result of renewing his mind, J.C. Penney went on, because of the power of a song, to rebuild his financial empire to well over $1 billion mark and celebrate with his family and friends his 95th birthday. What an inspiring story. But it also indicates to us what worry can do. and even fear. In fact, fear and worry can be worse than an actual virus or sickness itself. In this COVID-filled and fearful world, perhaps if we worry about contracting the virus and fear fills our hearts, it can actually have an adverse effect on our health. Studies have shown that fear suppresses immune function, and it may make us more susceptible to contracting certain viruses and illnesses such as COVID-19. So what can we take away from this story? Try not to fear. Be not afraid. Don't panic. Trust in God and know that if He is watching over you and He is taking care of you, we don't have to worry about tomorrow because He is already there.